it.
So welcome to another episode of Spilling Ink, the talk show that takes you behind the book to meet the authors and professionals in the publishing industry. Tonight is our Halloween episode. As you can see, all of our guests are ready for the holiday weekend. Jason, what are you going for as Halloween?
Well, right now I am a goofy clown that is obsessed with animals. Who knows what Halloween will bring? But welcome to the show tonight, guys. It's great to see everyone.
All right. The wig is working, dude. I'm liking that.
I know.
Yeah. I was just saying, it's been 20 years since I've had hair, and I don't know how you guys deal with this all the time. This is a lot of maintenance just having it on my head here.
Yeah, washing it and combing it is too.
So who do we have with us tonight, Katie?
Tonight we actually have some returning guests. You guys might remember Jenna Elizabeth Johnson. She's been on our show a couple of times. She was formerly in the Dragon Anthology with us. Rest in peace, Dragon Anthology. And she is also the author of many dragon-related books. Say hi, Jenna.
Hello, everyone. Jenna Elizabeth Johnson here. Nice to see you all again. I'm wearing my masquerade mask tonight. I have a couple things in here, so maybe I'll switch it out partway through. Just things interesting. Great to be here and hoping to have a great discussion with all these wonderful authors.
I just have
Awesome.
a quick
Welcome back to the show. And another returning guest. You might remember her for a couple weeks ago. We were having some technical difficulties, but we got Ellen Preston back. Hi, how you doing?
Hi there. How are you? And today I am Diana Prince, Wonder Woman's alter ego. So
I like
that's
it.
what I am for Halloween.
I like it. And your costume took so much effort. I love the commitment that you put into it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Jenna, I just have to say, or ask you rather, when you were introducing yourself, did you kind of forget your name for a second there? It sounded like you might have forgotten your middle name in the middle of saying it.
Do you want me to take my time to say it?
No, it's fun. We don't have time for that.
It's the mask. It has to be the mask.
It's the mask.
Oh.
Yes.
She has donned her alter ego, so she's forgotten who she really is.
Oh, that's right.
I have.
That's
After this week, yeah, my brain's mush.
There's no more Jenna Elizabeth Johnson. There's only Jenna.
By one name.
All right. Well, let's start
Add that
out
to the list of ways you know you've made it when you've gone to just one name.
LM, let's start with you tonight. Tell us a little bit about what you write.
I write urban fantasy YA. I write contemporary romance YA, as well as science fiction and some paranormal. That's my list so far, but who knows what may come next.
How long have you been writing?
I've been writing since I was 12, actually. I used to carry around a little notebook and write all the time. And then when college happened, I stopped writing as much and then had kids. And about 10 years ago, took my oldest son looking for books, and he could not find anything he wanted to read because there was nothing that had boys on the front covers for him. And so I said, well, maybe I could write you something, and he laughed.
Oh, no. No,
So,
is that your oldest son in the picture behind you there? I see some awesome pictures on the wall.
Yeah, that's my oldest son right there. I have 4 kids, by the way.
Awesome. Hey, so do I. All right.
Yeah.
It's nice to meet a fellow crazy person.
Exactly, we are.
Oh. So what is your newest book? I know you just released Fierce Tides. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Fierce Tides is the last book of my Purgatory Reign series. And it is a series, urban fantasy series geared into angels, demons, magic, secret societies, quest of sorts. So I really kind of mixed a lot of genres in it. So there's a little sci-fi sprinkling in there, as well as some fantasy, because there's lots of hidden places that they go, as well as of course, urban fantasy, part of it where, you have angel and demons. So I had a lot of fun with it. And this is the last book of the series of 4 books.
It sounds like it's got a little bit of everything in there. Now, you had mentioned before you first started writing when your son couldn't find anything in the bookstore that he really wanted to read. Now, when you're writing your books, and this is something I don't think that we've really talked about before, when you're writing, are you writing for just a broad audience for everyone, or in your head are you thinking that this is a story a male reader might really enjoy, or a female reader might really enjoy?
My books are very different in that I really pulled a lot from my childhood. So you usually see a lot of camaraderie in my books. There's usually always 3 to 4 people in the book, but maybe only 1 or 2 to 3 point of views. And it's from the standpoint of kind of the way I grew up and the way I see my kids grow up with, good friendships. So the books are very, I'd say, character focused and driven.
Okay.
And it's for the standpoint of to be enjoyable for both males as well as females.
Okay. So they're
I'd
pretty
like to ask that question of Jenna too, because that's a really good one, Jason, to get the viewpoint of what you think of when you write. Who are you writing for?
Yeah. Well, what do you think, Jenna? Well, first of all, Jenna, tell us a little bit about what you write.
Okay, kind of like LM, I'm kind of across the board with fantasy. I have a young adult, kind of middle grade young adult epic fantasy series that features dragons, elves, in a completely different world. I also have a young adult paranormal romance series that is set, it's kind of contemporary. It's set in our world, but then eventually kind of branches out into the Celtic otherworld. And the Otherworld series is very much for, I think, my ideal audience for that, I think, is teenage girls. However, I've had all kinds of people, all different age groups, kind of respond to me with that. For my ASEAN series, though, my goal when I first started that one was to build a strong female character. And it's funny how LM mentions her son not seeing any boys on the covers. And I was thinking when she was talking about that, how there's so many fantasy adventures out there for the middle grade age where the main character happens to be a boy hero, at least in the epic fantasy thing. I mean, you look at Percy Jackson, Harry Potter, Aragon, male characters who are the ones out there going through adventures. I mean, they have female friends, but they're the main characters. So with the ASEAN series, I wanted my main character to be a girl who's very much a tomboy. She wants to go out there and have adventures. And I'm hoping that appeals to both girls and boys. I read once that boys will read boy heroes, especially at a certain age, I guess between 8 and 12, 8 and 13, about that age, will totally read boys, but they're not too keen on reading about girls doing these things. Whereas girls will read both boys and girls being the main heroes. I mean, I'm a Harry Potter fan, I'm an Aragon fan, but I also like some of those stories with the girl heroes. So with the ASEAN series, I definitely wanted to make a female character who isn't into being the princess, who wants to go out and doesn't mind getting dirty and taking on the bullies and having these adventures in her world.
I think you touched on something important there. It seems like, and back me up if you agree with me here, that epic fantasy is very boy hero, and urban fantasy seems to be more very girl hero or heroine.
Right, yeah, and I think it's also with age. So high school, you realize that most of the market that points to high schoolers is generally girls. It's kind of like they think that boys no longer really want to read. So for my oldest son, that's why really I started the Purgatory Rain series, because I wanted to grow, I guess, my series with him. And I did another series called Bandits that's about, kind of like pirates, but more of a sci-fi pirate edge. And it was because for a 9th grade boy to maybe 11th grade boy, my son couldn't find anything to really, feed his enjoyment of reading that wasn't too old for him, but still had romance, but it wasn't overwrought by romance to the point where he was like, this is a romance book. So, so that's really what I went for. Like, my books have romance, but that's kind of like the secondary story. The prime story is And the prime purpose is I'm young, but I can save the world too, and I can do it with my friends. And then the secondary purpose is about love. So, and that was really kind of driven, I guess, by his influence more so than my daughter's influences.
I'm going to jump in there too, because I've noticed with my ASEAN series that I have had both boys and girls telling me they've really enjoyed it. Some of my biggest readers for the series are twin boys who absolutely love this series, which was very heartening for me, because I want boys and girls to know that it doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl, you can be a strong person either way. So it's nice to know that there are boys, like an equal amount of boys and girls that enjoy Jera's story in the ASEAN series. And with the Otherworld series, the trilogy, the original trilogy, perspective. So it's definitely marketed for the girls. And I meant to just kind of finish with that series and move on, but it's kind of stuck with me. And so now I'm working on a sequel trilogy told from my male character's perspective. And I don't know if that's going to bring more male readers in. It'll be interesting to see things told from his perspective and to see how people react to that, just to get his side of the story and then continue the story on. So that's what I'm working on right now.
You know, and I remember growing up, gosh, I'm trying to think of what age I really got into reading a lot. And I just keep thinking later middle school is when I started really pounding through books, you know, 7th, 8th grade. Where are you going, Bird? Come here. Trying to
About when I started picking up reading as well. It was right about middle school, but I was reading Anne Rice at that point.
Oh, yes, that's heavy stuff. And, you know, I remember the first novel I think that I really got into it, and I was young. It was probably, probably 6th, 7th, 8th grade in there, and at my grandparents' house, who were just the loves of my life. I absolutely adore my grandparents, and they had an upstairs room that was kind of like a loft that overlooked the house, and it was a little reading nook, and it was my grandmother and grandfather's, you know, fiction collection, and there was a book up there called Deep Lie, and it was like an espionage novel. I don't even know who the author is at this point, but I remember reading it, and it had tons of action. It had swearing in it. It had sex in it. It had death in it. And I after I put that down, I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. And I was like, oh my God, this reading thing is actually really cool. It's not just what the teachers make us read in school. You know, I went to a Catholic school growing up, and so our reading materials were quite limited. We were very censored.
I went to Catholic school too.
Yeah. And you know what? Hey, nothing wrong with religious education, but you know, we were, you know, pretty cloistered in what we were allowed to see. But yeah, so
I don't know. I went to 12th grade Catholic school, and some of the books that we read, Gone with the Wind in 8th grade. I remember that.
Nice.
Just a small group of us read Gone with the Wind, and we read some stuff where I was thinking, which is funny because I think about when I write, I think about the kids that are going to read, because I still work at a school. I mean, my part-time job, I'm an instructional aide, so I'm constantly thinking about this and what are their parents going to do to me if they get a hold of my book and it's totally inappropriate. I have to think about that.
Nice.
But then I have to stop and I have to think about what I read in high school, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, my stuff's totally fine, because some of that stuff we read in high school. I think I know why the cage bird sings. There's a few scenes in that book that are kind of a little graphic. And of course, that's a different type of story. But again, I think kids are not as in. I mean, we want to keep them innocent in a sense, but sometimes, I mean, like Katie's saying, she was reading Anne Rice, so
I know, and that confuses the mother in me when people ask me about my books. You know, can I let my daughter read this? I'm like, I don't know if I want you reading my books as a teenager, but then again, I was. So where's the line on that one?
Well, you know what I do? I actually, some of my books, I will go through and find the scenes that might be considered too risque, them off, at least on the display copy. So if a parent does come up, if they have a 13, 14-year-old and they're not sure, I'll say, okay, this is the scene where it gets the most graphic, and I let them sit there and read through it to see if they think it's safe for their kid to read. I have that option. Yeah, that way the parent's making the decision.
I like that a lot.
Jason, you were beta reading for me, and you asked me what age group that story was meant for, and my initial reaction was adult, but after going over it again, young adult would be okay for that.
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I have my second book, Delia, which was it was a love story, and there was quite a bit of sex in it. It wasn't erotica level sex, but there was a good amount of sex scenes, and my oldest daughter had read it or read through most of it, and she was like, it's a cool book, Dad, whatever. And then my younger daughter, who I think was 13 at the time, she's like, well, can I read it? And I was like, and I told her, I said, there's a lot of sex in this book. You're not going to enjoy it right now. When you get a little bit older and you have more understanding, I don't have a problem with you reading it, because you're going to understand what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to say. Because I don't like to censor what my kids read and watch, but also have to be smart about it too. I don't necessarily want them to be ignorant to things, but I don't feel like they need to be exposed to certain things unnecessarily, especially without a good understanding. So I don't know. That's an interesting and sensitive topic, especially when it comes to YA. I remember when I was in higher middle school, and we didn't call it middle school in Catholic school. It's just we had K through 8, and then there was high school. But anyhow, I remember one of my favorite authors was Christopher Pike. And Christopher Pike wrote all sorts of, these action thriller, suspense thrillers, and there was some naughty stuff in them. Looking back, I don't think there was outright hard sex scenes, but it was definitely enough that when you read it, you're like, oh, I'm reading something naughty. This is good stuff. And there was swearing in it, and people got killed, and the characters were all in their upper teens, so it was clearly geared for a higher young adult. But I remember I loved those things, and a lot of people that I went to school with were reading the similar things. So I think that kids especially, like things that are a little bit edgier, but at the same time, as authors and parents and fellow humans, I think that we need to be also respectful of what our young people are going to read. And I don't know exactly where the line is on that. I consider Pathosis, which is my kind of zombie apocalypse thriller, I consider that to be YA, and to me, YA writing, it meant I wasn't going to write any sex in it at all. There is some swearing, there's maybe 2 F-bombs in the whole thing, but other than that, I was like, okay, everything else, I feel like I'm comfortable with high school students reading.
But when we were working on our plague stories, our stories for Plague of Dragons, and I was kind of pushing the more adult because I was ready to move on. I'd written so much YA. And I remember talking to some of the authors, and we were a little concerned, like, oh, what's appropriate, what's too much? And I remember pulling up Sarah J. Maas. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Sarah J. Maas. I really like her Court of Thorns. And so that's marketed YA. And when I started reading it, I thought...
What's the series again? Sorry.
This is Court of Thorns and Roses.
Okay.
If you've read that, it's popular right now. But pick with those sex scenes, and I'm reading this book, and I'm thinking, this is YA. This is more new adult to me. So I'm thinking new adult is probably what we're looking for. But I remember reading it, and I even double checked on Amazon just to see what categories it's under, and it said teens. So I mean, technically 18 is still teen, but legally adult. But still, it's kind of. I wonder if other authors, if the traditionally published authors, have to worry about this sort of stuff. If they think about it, or if they just go ahead and
they usually
take care of all that.
They usually just go ahead and write it, and then their publishers will address it. But usually they let it fly. I have daughters that are avid readers, and we would co-read, the same books, and books that they. The cover did not give away that it had sex or any extreme violence in it. The back cover didn't give it away. And then we would read, and I'm reading it. I'm like, she's reading this, but but you just didn't know until you started to get into the book. However, I have one of my daughters is a really big gamer. And she plays lots of video games, and video games themselves are very graphic. Some have sex in them. Just watching YouTube videos has more graphic descriptions of sex and other issues than any of my books or any of the books that I considered a little too adult to have. So it really is, I think, comes to what the author is comfortable with.
Or even like TV shows like the CW, which is more kind of for, I don't really watch the CW, but I know that some of the shows on there are a little bit kind of pushing, like Nickelodeon. I was watching like one of, I think, Amanda Bynes' series, and I'm watching this, I'm all, this is for, middle graders and younger, like preteens, and some of the issues they bring up on there, I was surprised.
I can remember too, though, when I was a younger reader, if I got to a section that, let's say it had like sexual content in it, reading Anne Rice, there's a ton in there. I can remember kind of skimming ahead and getting to the good parts, to the action, to the actual story whenever they got to those parts. So, a lot of readers will do the same thing. They're going to read what they want to read. And if it's something that we might think is risque or we might be worried about, they might just be skipping over it.
Exactly. And that's why I always say, as an author, I write what I'm comfortable writing. And if I'm writing for YA and I don't see that it brings any value to the story to describe the act, then I don't do it. Because it's about the value it is bringing to the story, the value it's bringing to your characters. In my books, there are characters that have been sexually abused and physically abused by captors. I don't describe those, but it is definitely understood that they withstood those abuses, because I don't think I need to describe them, and I don't want to trigger anyone because it doesn't add to the story. But the act does add to the character development, so it is very obviously explained by the characters' actions as well as their words that they had some type of trauma. So that's really what I think it boils down to. Does it add to the story and to the character development? Does it serve a true purpose? Because if it doesn't serve a true purpose, then it's just you writing porn. So that's really what you ask yourself.
And I think Stephen King, and I'm a big Stephen King fan, and one of his books that I think is phenomenal, and anyone out there who writes or wants to get into writing should check it out. It's called On Writing, and a lot of different authors have written a book on writing. And in it, he said that, while he writes horror and while terrible things happen in his book and sex happens in his books, he doesn't like to go into overly gratuitous sex or violent scenes, describing everything bit by bit. He said, he considers it to be bad writing and that it doesn't actually add to the story. There may be a sex scene and you know exactly what's going on, but it's not like reading erotica. There may be violence, there may be terrible things happening, but it's not reading a slasher novel. It's not grisly, but it's still horrible. And I think that if you can pull that off, then you're really doing something right. If you can make the reader feel the way you want them to without having to go overboard, I think that's awesome. However, there is a time and a place for everything. And if you're writing erotica, if you're writing something that's supposed to be a slasher novel, then by all means you gotta freaking do it. You've got to do your job.
Trusting your instincts too. I think a lot of the times I find myself trusting my instincts, or I'll be writing something and it just doesn't feel right, doesn't feel right, and I finally somehow figure it out because my instincts were telling me this isn't working. I don't know if that's a hard thing to convey, to explain to people. I mean, when people ask you, where do your stories come from? I don't really know. Most of the time I'm sitting here staring off into space and all of a sudden, I just got this idea. So I don't know if that's the same for you guys. I mean, I know some things do influence certain parts of the aspects of the story, but sometimes it's just a spontaneous thing.
Oh, for sure. And I find that most of it's funny. My wife helps me a lot with story ideas because she has, I'll tell you, I don't know if she's an angel or a psychotic or something. Every once in a while, she'll just say, "Hey, had this great story idea," and she'll rattle off something that's like, "Oh my God, girl, there's something wrong with you?" But they're amazing at the same time. So she helps me a lot with story ideas. But a lot of what I write is really influenced by kind of my day-to-day life and what I've experienced that day or that week or that month, and it's all kind of piled up, and it's usually something I'm really interested in. And the story I'm working on now takes place in a veterinary clinic of sorts, and I work at a vet's office. I have been for 6 or 7 months now, so it's kind of funny how much of that gets pulled into the writing. And I definitely don't think it's just me, but yeah, it's kind of fun, because for me, I can look back and I'm like, oh man, I know what I was thinking, and I can totally relate to this, but then trying to write it in a way that other people are going to relate to and be interested in too. That's kind of the fun challenge of it all. Katie, you have written across the board age-wise. When it comes to kind of sex and violence in your stories, how do you decide going into the story, first of all, what age range you're going for? Do you have a clear plan when you go into it, or do you just kind of wing it and then say, okay, I like this story for this age group, and then edit accordingly?
It's funny because we were just talking about that. Like I said, you had beta read one of my stories for me, and you had asked me, what age group is this for? And I said, this is adult, new adult at best, but adult. And you'd said, well, it sounds more YA to me. So I had intended for it to be more adult marketed, but if it's leaning more towards the YA, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it wasn't intentional. I'd written that story to be a little older, but that's not to say that 16 on up wouldn't appreciate it.
Okay. Now your Chronicles series, do you consider Chronicles to be YA or New A, or what do you think?
Chronicles was definitely written to be new adult. I specifically pulled out any of the romantic elements because I didn't want romance to be a huge part of the story. And I feel like that leads towards the more adult side of things, because then you end up with a lot of sex and all that. And I didn't want there to be any real sex in there. Even in the later books in the series where there is a kind of a fade to black or an implied sexual encounter, it's not on screen, it's not in your face, and it's very quickly mentioned, and then you're back into the action.
No, and you said that you intended that to be more for adults, right?
Yeah, I wanted it to be the younger side of the adult market, but not necessarily for teens.
Okay.
So there's a lot of language too, along with the violence, but there's none of the romance or sex in there.
Before the show started, sorry, I'm having an ADD night tonight.
It's the wig, dude. It's the wig. I see the wig, and it's hard to take anybody seriously.
Yeah.
Jason, can I say I'm totally distracted by the fact that your wig matches the picture behind you, and I've been focusing on that the entire time.
Yes.
Let me turn that question around though, because you asked me, do I write with the intent of having it be in one marketplace? What do you do if you've written a story that you intended to be at a certain reader level, but it doesn't fit that reader level? Do you alter the story? Do you keep the story where it is and just rebrand your marketing? What do you do with it?
I would say rebrand your marketing, because sometimes, I've beta read authors, as well as had people beta read some of my earlier works that I tended to not really know the audience. I didn't really think of the audience I was focusing towards. It's very difficult and sometimes destructive to the core of the story when you try to dumb it down or rise it up. And I remember doing a beta read of a YA book that a book that I believe was originally adult, written as an adult romance, that they tried to make new adult. So it really looked like, as I was reading it, it felt like I was reading two different stories at different times, because the characters were doing younger things in the earlier part of the book, as far as their romance building and their language. But towards the middle of the book and end, it got really raunchy, like almost erotica written, and it just didn't seem to fit the story that was built up. And I don't think the author really realized that. She may have rewritten the first part of the book, but in thinking that, their relationship is now getting more intimate and I can keep the last part of the book. But the character's whole persona change when they started being intimate, because she kept the later part of, you know, the original romance written for adults. So I think that's something that's very easy for an author to miss, and that's why having beta readers helps so much.
Beta readers are so important to kind of clarifying your work. You know, they'll find things that you might not see because you're too close to it, that a reader can pick up on, plot holes, characters not acting properly, what have you. And, you know, me and Jason go back and forth because he's done a few betas for me and he thinks I don't listen to him. But I do take a lot of what he says to heart, because he does pick up on things that I don't necessarily see, or ways that the character might be acting that I didn't think came across one way, but they do on that second read through. Jenna, how do you feel about beta readers?
Oh gosh. I love my beta readers. They catch all the little things that I can't see. I actually ended up with a beta reader. I asked her to be my beta reader when she emailed me and said, oh, I noticed this in your third book and this couldn't happen because, and she was the only person to catch it. And of course they can't change it now. The book's already out there. So fortunately no one else has noticed. But I immediately responded back, would you like to beta read for me? Because I need people to kind of catch these little bits and pieces. They're very, I love having beta readers, because when I first started writing, and this is a very common new writer thing to do, is just go through your manuscript. And unless some sort of outside force stops you, you're going to go through that manuscript over and over and over and over. And I finally realized a million times I'm always going to want to change something. So I had to learn how to let it go. And now I write my story, I get the first draft done, I go through, smooth everything out maybe once, and then I send it to my beta readers. So I don't go through a lot of drafts anymore. I send it to the beta readers. And I think part of it is you learn how to write, you learn your craft, you become better at it. But I think having the beta readers helps with that process, because I know that they're going to be able to get the stuff that I wasn't able to put out in that final draft. So yeah, I would, if people can get beta readers, and if you're a new author, it's difficult sometimes to find writers groups. Ask your friends to do it, although they're not the best because they love you and they don't want to hurt your feelings. But that's how I started. And then hopefully if you get a good group of readers, you can kind of post something. Hey, I'm looking for beta readers, or maybe someone will.
Wide range of readers too, because you don't just want the fangirl type readers who love your work, but you do want the readers who know your work because they know your voice, they know how you write, and they know what they expect from you. But you also want genre readers, people who know what to expect from the genre that you're writing in, as well as technical readers too. I know, Jason, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, about using technical readers to make sure you're getting details right, like weaponry, like medical information. I'm drawing a blank here, but different things that would require somebody with a specific skill set to understand, because your readers guaranteed will pick up on a mistake you make.
And they'll write a review.
Yes, they will. Yes, they will.
Despite the massive amounts of spelling errors, it was still a good story. Like, of course, thank you for mentioning that.
Now, one thing I do too, when I send out for my beta reads, I tell my beta readers to specifically don't pay attention to the grammar, spelling, punctuation issues, because when I go to revise that story, that sentence that they might have gotten caught up on because they were worried about the punctuation may not exist in the next draft. So I always tell them, pay just close attention to the plot, the characters, how they're interacting. Tell me if that's working, because once it's done, it's going to go to my editor and she's going to beat the crap out of me for it.
Yeah.
What challenges have you guys had with beta readers?
Okay. I think the biggest challenge is maybe getting feedback from them, because I've had a few where they'll say, oh, I loved it. Okay, great. Do I need to change anything? And that's, I mean, I'm glad that they did, but I can't tell if that's they didn't find anything, or they just wanted to see this, to get to the story. Another one is maybe if there is a time constraint. I try not to do that with my beta readers. I try to give them enough time to be able to read through it. Sometimes that doesn't happen. I don't hear back from everyone before the deadline, especially if I'm trying to get something done for something specific. Those are the biggest challenges, I think, for the beta readers, is just finding people who can give you that feedback and getting it done in time if that needs to be done.
I used to send out a questionnaire with some of the beta reads, and it would be just at the end of the chapter, here's some questions I'd like you to think about and answer. And people didn't necessarily respond well to that because they wanted to give their own feedback. So one of the methods that I've used recently is to only send out certain sections at a time. So I'm only going to give out maybe 2 or 3 chapters and get to a certain point. And then once they're done with that, then we kind of have a back and forth conversation. Okay, what did you think was going on here? How did this work for you? Did that work? All right, here's the next section. And that seems to be getting a better response than just lumping the whole thing in their lap and then saying, here, answer these questions.
Some challenges I've had is you finding a beta reader that's, one, not going to try to rewrite your entire story to what they typically like, because readers have very specific tastes, I think. So it's been something I had to learn to find readers that really like what I'm writing, that they like the genre, they are open to the storylines, because sometimes I would write, some readers are very specific, like, you should put this in first person. Well, I like a close third. That's really where I'm comfortable writing at. So that was always a challenge, is to make sure that I find somebody that really is interested in the genre and the type of stories, because some people, like, if they read romance, they only want a virgin, or they only want, they only want a billionaire. I mean, really, you have readers that are that specific. So that was a challenge. The other challenge, I guess, would be, like you said, feedback, and where I could tell that they're getting really bent over, with grammar instead of really looking at the story. So I like your idea of just giving them a piece at a time so that they're not overwhelmed, because sometimes I think you can get a lot out of them just reading that first chapter to tell you if you're on the right path, or your character's voice is what you need it to be, and that may be all you need. But I do find that there are some authors that are not indie authors, that are more, I would say, mainstream, traditional. They don't use betas and say that they don't. So that, to me, also is something that I wanted to explore, to see, have you met other authors that are, I guess, more experienced in their craft, that no longer rely on beta readers and just like to deal closely with their editors and proofreaders?
Well, I wonder if in that case, if those agents and editors that they're working with aren't doing that job as well. They're reading through the manuscript and they're probably sending back notes. We need this changed. We need that changed. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. So I wonder if, because they're filling that role, if those authors no longer need to go to the public for it.
Or even if it's, depending on who it is, if it's someone who is even higher up, the risk of the manuscript leaking. So if it's like a big name author or someone who's a New York Times bestselling author, they probably don't want those manuscripts out there floating. And specific beta readers, or like what Katie was saying, they have someone else to do that, where they know that the pieces of the story are not going to be leaked anywhere. So I wonder if that's part of it.
That makes
very
sense.
well could be. I mean, you get those, like, the Stephen Kings and the Anne Rice's, they can't risk their work being out there and leaking before it gets published.
Yeah, definitely not. Jason's back.
Can you hear me
Jason's coming
now?
back.
Am I back for real?
Well, I don't see you yet, but I hear you.
Oh,
I see you.
Here.
Woo!
Oh,
That blends in with your picture. I have a question.
Yes.
For everyone. What about cover art? What do you guys do? I mean, have you ever talked about cover art much on Spilling Ink? Well, because I had my ASEAN covers redone. That was a couple years ago, and I've just recently had my other world covers redone, and I'm still kind of going through the switch through process and changing the interior a tiny bit. So that's taking forever and a day, as you might know. I'm just wondering, what do you guys do? I mean, what are your thoughts on cover art and cover artists?
Well, I recently revamped one of my major series with a new cover, and I think now I'm a lot smarter about cover art than I was before by collaborating with other authors during the Kindle world release for Rune's Universe. And one thing I learned is this time when I approach my series, because I know it's a series, I am branding that series. I'm branding the covers. I'm also coming up with kind of like, I'd say, a symbol of sort that identifies that series within my within all of my other series. So when you see that brand or that symbol, you know it's for this 4-book series.
Yeah.
And it also, I'm already pre-thinking about the series in totality, and the characters in totality, in the background, so that everything matches and is in sync with each other. And that's something I never thought about doing before, but by collaborating with other authors that have been doing this a while, and even with Edna Walters, who did a really good job of branding some of her series. When you do that early on, it saves you so much money. You also have your readers very invested in the series, and all of your promotions have a link to each other. So that's the way I'm approaching going forward. Any of my series is I'm thinking about the complete project, and I'm thinking about branding each project and the covers to go with that.
Now, question, because when I released my Otherworld series, I just happened to get it done, my first 3 in a year. That's just, I didn't plan it that way. That's just how the story came out. And now that I'm working on the sequel trilogy, my goal is to get them all finished before I even start releasing them, because I want to do that rapid release every 2 to 3 months, new book coming out, because I think that's what really kind of, I guess that's what's working for indie authors now, is that rapid release. And so that sounds kind of like what you're doing with your 4-book series, is you're getting that all wrapped up, all finished, so that when you go to release, your readers aren't waiting as long, or they're not, waiting.
Well, for me, releasing, I usually try to keep a series to 1 to 2 books a year, because I look at it, I want to release on my schedule, because even with me, with building up, it's very expensive of time as far as effort to release every 3 to 6 months. But I think if you, like now I have a readers group, I have a newsletter, I engage with my readers consistently. So I don't think I necessarily need to feed that every 30 to 60 days, which you don't, as long as your readers feel as though they're connected to you in your series. And that's another thing that working collectively with other authors taught me. The ones that do really well, they keep their readers captivated within their stories by having a relationship and building a relationship with that reader around that series. And that's something that I'm also trying to do going forward with branding the series earlier on.
That's an excellent point that we really should take a moment to stop on, because a lot of us in the indie world are feeling like once we get on that hamster wheel, we have to process new books every couple of months, or we basically fade into oblivion. Whereas there are some very prominent authors out there that are still releasing on a fairly normal pace, 1 to 2 books a year, and are still able to do well. What are your thoughts on that, and where do you fit in the spectrum?
I think my problem right now is that I haven't released any big novels in a while. I've released a lot of short stories recently. I think my last big novel was my last ASEAN book, and that was in May of 2015. But that's 160,000 words. So I find it hard to try to work on, they're all over the place. And plus right now I have so many stories. I have at least 10 different books right now, or stories, that are trying to get my attention, and it's exhausting. So it's kind of like bottlenecking me. I can't get free. So I think it's hard focusing on one story. It was easier when I started out and I just had the one series, and I was very passionate about it because it was brand sparkly new. And now it's like, I got to work on this, that, and the other thing. And I have anthology projects I need to get done, and my writers group stuff. And so just for me recently, I've been extremely busy. So it's difficult.
This year for me has been very different than the previous years, and I took actually off from writing and publishing for 2 years, and came back with a bang by taking the time to do the care and feeding, to build my newsletters, to build my readers groups on Facebook, my fan groups, and now I feel like I'm at a comfortable point where I know I can write something in 2 to 3 releases in a year is comfortable for me. And now I have a readership that I'm keeping involved in my stories, and I, interact with them on a weekly basis. So I don't feel the pressure because they're waiting to beta read and to get my new releases, because I'm constantly sending feeders to my readers group and my newsletter. So I don't feel that pressure because I have invested readership that I built up through doing newsletter builds and fan groups, that I don't need to kick out a book every 60 days for them to buy it.
Okay, so LM, you're talking about building your newsletter. Do you have any tricks? Because that's something I've heard is really the thing to do. And I don't send my newsletter out that often. Maybe I need to send it out every month. I send it out every other month because I feel that it's inundation and people don't necessarily want to get a newsletter so often. And but what have you done to build your newsletter, to keep people invested? And you talk about your fan groups.
That could be a full show, but some of the tricks with my newsletter is there's certain things that I do with my newsletter, and my readers know the format. The format is usually I give them something personal. I share a new release, or I share my sales. I share something about my series. And then I always have a giveaway. So I've been involved in collective giveaways. So I collaborate with other authors, and we do a collective giveaway where we put in $5, and the booty of that giveaway can be anywhere between $25 to $150. So I always have a giveaway. And the other thing is I always feature other authors that have books on sale. So I do a newsletter swap with other authors. If I feature their book in mine, they feature my books and theirs. And that's really what I do. And I do 2 newsletters a month. But I have the newsletter set that if they didn't open it, it tells them, oh, you don't want to miss this deal. I get a lot of click-throughs and a lot of people that share my newsletters because of that consistency. They know that they will have a giveaway, whether they want to participate or not. I don't spend a lot of money in the giveaway. And if I can't do a collaborative giveaway, I'll do a $20 gift card or jewelry or something that has to do with the branding of any of my series. And I build them by doing Rafflecopter giveaways and using Head Talker and Thunderclap as kind of like platform building, sharing, and then I scoop up all of those game players or those people that joined the giveaways, and I add them to my newsletter, and I prune them through every month. And I can honestly say I've been doing that for 6 months. It has made a great difference in my sales and my visibility and maintaining my readership.
That sounds insane. I don't know how you find time to do anything, because that's
I have an assistant.
Well, yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, putting together my newsletter per month, and I have that. I do an introduction, and then I have the news, and I always do my Living Life Authorly, where I talk about something personal, and I've started featuring authors. I know I've featured Katie, I think. I don't know if I've featured Jason yet. I think I've featured Jason. I can't remember. If not, I need to.
No, you need to feature Jason.
I need to feature you. And I do what I do with mine is, so every other month I send out my newsletter because it's pretty big and there's a lot of stuff in there. And then on the off months, I grab a random name. I pick a random name from my list, and they win a book of their choice. But that doesn't seem to work. So maybe I need to try that Rafflecopter and all those different.
Well, I mean, some gifts that people love is just a $5 gift card.
Yeah, gift cards.
So if you do a $5 Amazon gift card, people love that, It doesn't have to be a lot, but they do like it, and if it's consistent, they will consistently open your newsletter.
That's a good point. Yeah, I should try doing that. Yeah, because you could easily just do the e-gift card, email them the e-gift card just once you pull their name. Yeah.
Exactly.
Katie, do you still do a newsletter? Do you do a newsletter?
I do on the months that I'm doing promotion for like new books or new releases. I tend to do one every other week, if not every week, as I ramp up towards the big release day. And then I tend to fall off a little bit during the off months. Like right now, I think I've only done one newsletter in the last month. And like LM said, you usually have a giveaway or something in there. This last one, I did not have a giveaway in. And it was just an informational newsletter talking about upcoming events. And I actually got hate mail as a reply because I didn't have anything to give away. And I thought, wow, that's kind of rude. And it almost put me off on doing the newsletters because the one time I didn't put anything as a, feature another author sale or a giveaway, I get hate mail for it.
Yeah, well, you're going to have people that are just there for that. But the truth of the matter is people are creatures of habit. And if you start to have a consistency with the way that you do your newsletter, they expect that. For me, what I do is I use a Dropbox, and I put in that Dropbox all of the people that I'm newsletter swapping with for that month, and for those 2 weeks in that month, and then they're each in a different folder, and I put in there the news that I'm posting as well as the raffle copter. And I also have other authors, I feature their giveaways in my newsletter also. And my PA, which is my daughter, aka my assistant, goes in there and she does, I pay her $20 a month and she builds my newsletter for me for the month, and it gives her exposure to marketing. It makes things easier for me, and it's all in a central place.
Oh, I like that though, putting the kids to work.
Yeah, I have a personal assistant. I don't have any of those.
I'm gonna have to look into that because I've got a teenager that's always wanting money.
I seriously, the exact moment she said that, I started thinking, wow, I've got 3 teenagers. They could be doing something.
Put the minions to work. I like that idea.
So I don't have any kind of newsletter. I don't have any kind of blog. I have a website that's pretty much a static website. And I keep hearing from everyone, basically everyone that comes on the show talks about their newsletter and how helpful it is. And I don't have that. I don't know where to start with that. I don't know where to start getting email addresses. LM, can you help me with that at all? I was just telling Katie and Jenna, I don't have any kind of newsletter or blog of any kind. And I feel like that would be a good idea for me to start, but where do I begin? How do I get those first people to say, okay, I want to try your newsletter? How do I advertise that?
Have you done any giveaways? Well, I started doing a blog tour where I did a giveaway. Okay. Yep. So I started doing blog tours where I do a giveaway. And when you do Rafflecopter giveaways, it gives you the list of everybody that participated in your giveaway. And okay, that's the beginning of your newsletter. And what I also did was there's several places on Facebook that are newsletter building services that will that you buy in with other authors and you do a big giveaway of, sometimes our giveaways were $250 and we get a couple of thousand readers that like our genre. So that's really how I started. Is I started doing a couple of blog tours, giveaways, and that's how I built my list.
So where do you keep this list? Because I know that a lot of people use MailChimp, and I know that my wife uses MailChimp for her business. She has a photography studio, but how do you keep track of these people? Is that something you save in a certain contacts list that it has to? Rafflecopter will let you download an Excel spreadsheet of the list.
I also use Insta Freebie, and that also lets me download a list. I changed my marketing to say, if I'm giving away something, you're going to have to give me something in return. So usually when I do a raffle copter, I ask people to join my newsletter outright, and if they don't, that's fine. I still collect them on my list, and I have them promote my stuff. So when you approach it that way of, okay, if I give you a free book to review, you're going on my list. Is that okay with you? So that's where I directed my marketing, because as an indie author, you want to hold on to your readers, because if you don't hold on to your readers group, your readers, then you're basically depending on rebuilding your marketing every single time you have a release.
I'm going to jump into, I've tried the Insta Freebie, and I tried the 30-day trial to have people, they have to sign up for newsletter. I lost most of them afterward. But what I do, Jason, is, and we created tickets for Phoenix Comic-Con last year, and I can't find those right now, but I'm going to show you. I have these, and they're just basically, I'll show you real quick, a raffle ticket or a free drawing. And every event, actual physical event I go to, I bring these with me. And typically, half the people say, yes, sign me up for your newsletter. I've gained a ton of people just doing this. And yes, it takes time. You have to go through it. But I think most of my newsletter recipients I've earned or I've accumulated through doing this drawing ticket. And you can even put on the bottom just a disclaimer saying, if you enter, I'm going to sign you up. And I use MailChimp. And so people, it's really easy to unsubscribe if people don't like that. And, but that, I would try that. I recommended that to many authors if they want to make the effort. I know there are a lot of online ways to do this. There are classes you can take. I haven't taken any of those because, of course, it's like, oh, pay to take this class. And I'm like, oh, is it really going to work?
Yeah. And I didn't take a class. I really just looked for services that would do newsletter building lists for you. And I think the most I paid for one service was $75. And out of that $75, I got 2,200 subscribers, and I still have those subscribers. So now I'm up to over 6,000 subscribers, and that I've only been working this for about 4 to 6 months.
That's
So what service was that? The $75
You know what?
service?
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know, but I could definitely send it to you, and you can plop it down in the the Facebook feed if you like.
Yeah, that would be great, because that sounds like a pretty good. I mean, I have I think 1,800 subscribers, and it would be great to have more. Everywhere I turn, I keep hearing this. Oh, build your newsletter list. That's how you build readers and how you get sales. I'm thinking, okay, but what's out there that's not going to rip you off, like with marketing in general?
And I didn't spend more than $100 for any of the newsletter building servers. And the other thing I did was just do my own giveaways. Like I basically have done a giveaway every single month of every single series that I've had, and it's bumped up my sales as well as added to my newsletter list.
See, and that's why we do this show, because we all get information from it, both you and I. Jason, I'm sure you're writing these notes down as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got notes.
Oh yeah, I'll have questions for LM later. I might just have to send her a message on it.
Yeah.
Hey, does your daughter want to be my personal assistant too? Because I could use someone to do this for me as well.
She would love to. She said yes. She heard me. She said sure.
Yes.
A budding business there.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's actually a really good stopping point for us tonight for the show. I want to thank you guys, both Jenna and LM, for hanging out with us and sharing your experience and your information. We definitely learned a lot in this episode, I think.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me back. Good to meet you, LM.
Wait, I just now saw that, Jenna, you changed costumes at some point during the show.
I did.
Well, you guys, it has been awesome having you on, and you've both been on before. LM, I'm glad that we were able to get through the technical difficulties and actually have a good show with you this time and learn a little bit more about you. That was awesome. And you're out there in beautiful Hawaii. I'm so jealous. That's amazing. That's on my bucket list of places I want to visit in my life. So I've never been.
You should come. I'll be here.
Well, I'm going to look you up then when I do. All right, ladies. Well, thank you so much for joining us again tonight on Spilling Ink, the talk show that takes you behind the scenes in the publishing world. This has been Jason and our lovely host, Katie. Have a good night, everybody.
Happy Halloween, everyone.